The space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between 3 star systems. It was massive. Millions of beings lived and worked there. Ships came and went every minute, carrying goods from 1,000 worlds. This was where the galaxy did business. This was where the rich became richer and the poor stayed invisible. Yuna walked through the merchant quarter with small, careful steps. She was 8 years old. Her clothes were simple and a little worn. Her dark hair was tied back in a plain style. Nothing about her suggested wealth or importance. She looked like any ordinary human child, perhaps the daughter of a minor trader or a ship worker. The aliens around her towered high above. Some had 4 arms. Some had scales that shimmered like jewels. Others floated on invisible waves of energy or walked on legs that bent in strange directions. They wore expensive robes made from fabrics that changed color with their moods. Their jewelry cost more than some planets. None of them looked at Yuna. She was too small, too plain, too human. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had joined only 200 years ago. While other species controlled thousands of worlds, humans had only 12. The great empires saw them as children playing at civilization. Cute, perhaps. Occasionally useful. But not important. Yuna did not mind being invisible. It let her see things clearly. She stopped near a large fountain in the center of the plaza. Water flowed upward in the low gravity, forming beautiful shapes before falling back down. Wealthy aliens sat on benches around it, discussing trade deals worth billions. But Yuna was not looking at the fountain. She was looking at the old creature huddled in its shadow. He was a Mavari. His species had wings like dragonflies, but his were torn and faded. His body was thin. His clothes were rags. He sat on the cold metal floor with a small bowl in front of him, hoping someone would give him food or credits. No one did. The wealthy aliens walked past him as if he did not exist. Yuna watched for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a protein bar. It was her lunch. She had been saving it because she was hungry. But the old Mavari looked hungrier. She walked over to him slowly. When she reached him, she bent down and held out the protein bar with both hands. She bowed her head slightly, the way her grandmother had taught her to show respect. The old Mavari looked up. His eyes were clouded with age and sadness. He stared at the food as if he could not believe it was real. "For you," Yuna said softly. "Please eat." His trembling hands took the bar. He did not speak. Perhaps he had forgotten how Yuna sat down beside him on the cold floor. She pulled out her water bottle and offered it to him as well. He drank slowly, carefully, like someone who had learned not to waste anything. From across the plaza, Ambassador Krivex watched this scene with growing amusement. Krivex was a Valari. His species looked like giant insects standing upright. He had sharp mandibles and eyes that saw in many directions at once. He wore the golden sash of a senior diplomat. He was powerful. He was wealthy. He was cruel in the way that powerful beings often become when they forget what it means to struggle. His mandibles clicked together as he laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. "Look at this," he called out to the merchants nearby. "Come and see." Several aliens turned to look. Merchant Torval, a reptilian sketh with green scales and cold eyes, slithered closer. Lady Malara, a tall being made of living crystal, paused her conversation to observe. "A human child," Krivex announced loudly, pointing at Yuna. "Wasting resources on street refuse. This is why humans remain a minor species. They do not understand the basic principles of value." Torval made a snorting sound that passed for laughter among his kind. Humans and their foolish feelings. They care about things that do not matter. No wonder they have so little. "Perhaps someone should teach the child," Lady Malara suggested. Her voice rang like glass bells. Someone should explain that the weak exist to be forgotten. That is the natural way. More aliens gathered. They watched Yuna sitting with the beggar as if it were a strange performance. Some recorded it on their devices. A human child showing kindness to worthless refuse. How funny. How pathetic. How perfectly human. Yuna heard their laughter. She understood their words. But she did not look at them. She stayed focused on the old Mavari, making sure he finished the water, asking quietly if he needed anything else. In the shadows of a nearby pillar, a woman watched everything. Her name was Dohi. She was middle-aged, with gray streaks in her black hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. She wore simple clothes like Yuna. Nothing about her appearance suggested who she really was. She watched her granddaughter being mocked by some of the most powerful beings in this sector. She watched and did nothing, not because she did not care. She cared more than anyone could know. She did nothing because this was exactly what Yuna needed to see. This was the lesson she needed to learn. Not from books or teachers, but from the cold reality of how the galaxy worked. Dahi touched the communicator on her wrist. She could end this with one word, one signal. But not yet, not until Yuna was ready. And so the old woman watched from the shadows as the laughter grew louder and the crowd grew larger, and her granddaughter continued to sit with a beggar, sharing everything she had. This was how it began. The crowd around Yuna grew larger with each passing minute. Word spread quickly through the merchant quarter. A human child was making a fool of herself in the central plaza. It was free entertainment. While Yuan remained on the cold floor beside the old Mavari beggar. She had given him her food and water. Now she simply sat with him, keeping him company. She did not seem to notice the dozens of aliens watching her. Or perhaps she noticed and did not care. The old Mavari, whose name was Oren, had not spoken a single word. But his clouded eyes never left Yuna's face. He watched her the way a man dying of thirst watches rain falling from the sky. With wonder. With disbelief. With something that might have been hope. Ambassador Krivex was enjoying himself greatly. He stood at the front of the crowd, his mandibles clicking with amusement. This was better than any deal he might make today. This was proof of everything he believed about humans. You see, he announced to the crowd, this is the problem with letting primitive species join galactic society. They bring their primitive ideas with them. They think feelings matter more than logic. They think weakness deserves reward. Many aliens nodded in agreement. This was common wisdom in the galaxy. The strong survived. The weak disappeared. That was the natural order. Anyone who thought differently was a fool. A new figure pushed through the crowd. Commander Voss was a Kreth, a species known for their size and their love of war. He stood nearly 3 meters tall. He had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle. His gray skin was covered with old battle scars. He wore the uniform of a military officer from one of the galaxy's great powers. He stopped in front of Yuna and looked down at her. His shadow covered both the girl and the beggar completely. Child, he said. His voice was deep and rough. Do you know what that creature is? Yuna looked up at him. She showed no fear, even though he could have crushed her with one hand. He is hungry, she said simply. Voss made a sound of disgust. He is a Mavari wastrel. His kind are famous for their weakness. They gamble away their fortunes. They poison themselves with drugs. They expect others to feed them while they contribute nothing. He chose his path. He deserves his fate. Maybe, Yuna said, but he is still hungry. Voss stared at her. He was not used to being answered back. Children from other species usually trembled when he spoke to them. This small human girl looked at him as if he were simply another person asking a question. Lady Selene glided forward. She was an Aethery, a species made of living light held in a vaguely humanoid shape. She glowed with soft colors that shifted as she moved. Her kind were known for their beauty and their cruelty. "How precious," she said. Her voice was musical and cold. Human empathy. They actually teach this weakness to their young. No wonder their little empire spans only 12 worlds while we control thousands. The crowd murmured agreement. Someone laughed. Someone else made a crude joke about human intelligence. Yuna listened to all of it. Her face remained calm. She did not cry. She did not argue. She simply sat with Arn and waited. This patience made some aliens uncomfortable. A normal child would have run away by now. A normal child would have been ashamed. But this girl acted as if their mockery meant nothing. As if she knew something they did not. Merchant Torval noticed this. The Sketh was a clever trader who had survived many dangerous situations. He knew when something was not quite right. He looked at Yuna more carefully. Her clothes were worn, yes, but the fabric itself was unusual. The stitching was too precise. These were not poor clothes made to look simple. These were expensive clothes made to look poor. Why would anyone do that? He started to speak, but Ambassador Krivix interrupted him. "I have an idea," Krivix announced. "Let us make this educational. Let us show this human child how the galaxy really works." He reached into his robe and pulled out a credit chip. It was worth enough to feed a family for a year. He held it up so everyone could see. "Child," he said to Yuna, "I will give you this credit chip. More money than you have probably ever seen. All you have to do is walk away from that beggar right now. Leave him behind and take the money. This is how the galaxy works. We reward those who make smart choices." The crowd fell silent. This was interesting. Would the human child abandon her principles for money? Of course she would. Everyone had a price. Yuna looked at the credit chip. Then she looked at Krivix. Then she looked at Orin, who sat beside her with tears forming in his clouded eyes. The old Mavari had seen this before. He knew how this would end. Everyone always chose the money. "No," Yuna said quietly. "Thank you, but no." Krivex's mandibles stopped clicking. "No, you refuse my offer?" "I am sitting with my friend," Yuna said. "I do not want to leave him alone." The word friend seemed to strike Arn like a physical blow. His thin body shook. The tears fell from his clouded eyes. Perhaps it had been decades since anyone called him that word in the shadows, though he smiled. Her granddaughter was learning exactly the right lessons. But the hardest test was still coming. She touched her communicator again and sent a quiet signal. It was time to prepare for what came next. The crowd did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. The commotion in the central plaza had grown too large to ignore. Station security finally arrived to see what was happening. Security. Chief Bannock pushed through the crowd with practiced efficiency. He was a Tereshi, a species that looked somewhat like bears walking upright. His fur was gray with age, and his eyes had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He had worked on Nexus Prime for 40 years. He thought he knew every kind of trouble. Behind him came Council Liaison Thren, a thin being whose species Yuna did not recognize. Thren's job was to observe and report to the station's governing council. He watched everything with careful, calculating eyes. Bannock reached the center of the crowd and stopped. He saw a human child sitting on the floor with a Mavari beggar. Around them stood some of the wealthiest and most powerful beings in the sector, watching as if this were some kind of show. "What is happening here?" Bannock demanded. His voice carried the weight of authority. "Move along, all of you. This area is for commerce, not entertainment." Ambassador Krivix stepped forward smoothly. He knew how to handle security officers. "Chief Bannock, we are merely observing a lesson in human inadequacy. This child wastes resources on a beggar, while her species can barely maintain their trade agreements. It is quite educational. Bannock looked at Krivix with tired eyes. He did not like the Valari ambassador. Few people did. But ambassadors were protected by diplomatic rules, so Bannock could do nothing about him. He turned his attention to Yuna instead. Something about her bothered him. He could not say what. Perhaps it was the way she sat so calmly among all these powerful beings. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him without any fear. "Girl," he said, "where are your parents? What ship did you come from?" Yuna finished adjusting Oren's ragged cloak before answering. "I am here with my guardian. She is nearby." "Your guardian lets you wander alone? Talk to beggars?" "She lets me make my own choices." Bannock frowned. This answer was strange. Human children on space stations were usually protected carefully. Their parents kept them close at all times. The galaxy was dangerous, and humans were still learning its rules. What kind of guardian would let a child walk alone through a crowded merchant quarter? "What is your guardian's name?" he asked. "Dahi," Yuna said. The name meant nothing to Bannock. But behind him, Council Liaison Thren suddenly became very still. His eyes widened slightly. His breathing changed. Thren was a professional observer. It was his job to know important people. He knew their names, their faces, their families, their histories. And the name Dahi triggered something in his memory. He looked at Yuna again. Really looked. He noticed the fabric of her clothes. Expensive material made to look cheap. He noticed the way she held herself. Straight back, calm hands, patient eyes. Not the posture of a common child. The posture of someone who had been trained from birth to face difficult situations. He noticed the way she had bowed when offering food to the beggar. That particular bow, with both hands extended and head slightly lowered. That was not a common gesture. That was a formal greeting used in the highest levels of human government. Thren's heart began to beat faster. Could it be possible? Could this small, plain-looking child be who he suddenly suspected she was? He needed to be sure before he said anything. Making a mistake about something like this would destroy his career. But if he was right, Merchant Torval had also noticed that something was wrong. The Sketh trader trusted his instincts, and his instincts were screaming at him. This situation was not what it appeared to be. "Chief Bannock," Torval said slowly, "perhaps we should investigate this child's identity more carefully. There is something unusual here." "Unusual?" Ambassador Krivix laughed. "What is unusual about human foolishness? We have all seen it before. Their species is famous for it." "Perhaps," Torval said, "but I've been a trader for 60 years. I know when something does not fit. And this child does not fit." Yuna watched this conversation calmly. She did not seem worried. She did not try to explain herself or defend herself. She simply sat with Oren and waited. Oren himself was watching the crowd with new interest. His clouded eyes moved from face to face. He knew sensed that something important was about to happen. He did not know what. But for the first time in many years, he felt something other than despair. Bannock made a decision. "I am going to call for identification verification. Girl, do not move. We will sort this out properly." He reached for his communicator, but before he could use it, a voice spoke from the edge of the crowd. "That will not be necessary. Chief Bannock." The voice was calm and clear. It carried the quiet confidence of someone who was used to being obeyed. The crowd parted as a woman walked forward. She was middle-aged, with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore simple clothes, just like Yuna. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or power, but the way she walked told a different story. Each step was precise, controlled, the walk of someone who had commanded soldiers, the walk of someone who had faced death many times and never flinched. Council Liaison Thren recognized her instantly. His face went pale. He dropped to one knee without thinking, an automatic response to being in the presence of true authority. Security Chief Bannock stared at him in confusion. Then he looked at the woman again. Recognition dawned in his old eyes. His mouth fell open. "Admiral Dahi," he whispered. The crowd fell completely silent. Every alien who knew that name felt their hearts freeze, and those who did not know the name were about to learn why they should have. Admiral Dahi walked through the crowd like a ship cutting through calm water. Aliens who had been standing tall a moment ago now stepped back to make room for her. They did not know why. Something in her presence demanded respect. Security Chief Bannock stood frozen. His mind was racing through memories. Admiral Dahi, the hero of the Battle of Crimson Nebula. The woman who had commanded the human fleet when the Void Swarm threatened to consume half the galaxy. 300 ships under her command. 47 hours of continuous combat. A victory that military academies still studied decades later. She had saved not just human colonies that day. She had saved 3 allied species from extinction. Billions of lives owed their existence to her decisions, and she had been standing in the shadows, watching her granddaughter be mocked. Doing nothing. Dahi stopped beside Yuna and Oren. She looked down at her granddaughter with gentle eyes. "I see you have made a friend," she said. "Yes, grandmother," Yuna replied. "His name is Oren. That is a good name." Dahi turned to look at the old Mavari beggar. "Hello, Oren. I hope my granddaughter has been good company." Oren stared up at her with his clouded eyes. He did not know who she was, but he knew she was important. He could feel it. She was kind, he managed to say. His voice was rough from years of silence. "She was kind to me." Dahi nodded. "Yes, she usually is." Ambassador Krivix finally found his voice. The arrogance had drained from his posture like water from a broken container. His mandibles clicked nervously. "Admiral Dahi," he said. "This is. We did not expect. That is to say, we did not know. You did not know that you were mocking the granddaughter of a fleet admiral?" Dahi's voice was calm, almost friendly. That made it more frightening. "No, I suppose you did not." Commander Voss, the giant Kreth warrior, took a step back. He had fought in many battles. He had faced death countless times. But standing before Admiral Dahi made him feel like a small child who had been caught doing something wrong. "With respect, Admiral," he said carefully, "we meant no insult. We were simply observing. Dahi tasted the word. "Yes, I was observing too. I observed several of the most powerful beings in this sector gather to mock a child for showing kindness to an old man. I observed them offer her money to abandon him. I observed them call human empathy a weakness. It was very educational." The crowd was completely silent now. Many aliens had begun recording this scene when it was just entertainment. Now they wished they could delete those recordings before anyone saw them. Council Liaison Thren rose from his knee. His face was still pale, but his mind was working quickly. He was a diplomat. He understood power, and he had realized something that the others had not yet understood. "Admiral," he said carefully, "you said this child is your granddaughter, but your daughter married." He could not finish the sentence. The implications were too enormous. Dewey smiled. It was not a warm smile. "My daughter Jiwan married Ambassador Tayan, yes. Jiwan is now the president of the United Earth Confederacy. Tayan serves as humanity's chief ambassador to the Galactic Council." She paused. "Which makes Yuna the heir to humanity's highest office." The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed. No one moved. They had mocked the heir to the United Earth Confederacy. They had called her stupid. They had laughed at her values. They had recorded themselves doing it. Ambassador Krivix looked like he might faint. His species could not actually faint, but he was trying his best. "The child," Lady Selene whispered. Her crystalline form flickered with panicked colors. "We did not know. We could not have known. She looks so ordinary." "Yes," Dahi agreed. "She does. That was intentional." She walked slowly around the edge of the crowd, looking at each face in turn. The mighty beings who had laughed so loudly now could not meet her eyes. "My granddaughter is 8 years old," Dahi continued. "In 10 years, she will begin her formal training for leadership. In 20 years, she may well be the most powerful human alive. And in 30 years, she may lead the coalition that determines the future of this galaxy." She stopped in front of Ambassador Krivix. "Before any of that happens, I wanted her to see how the galaxy really works. I wanted her to see how powerful beings treat those who cannot fight back. I wanted her to see who has honor and who has none." Krivix tried to speak, but no words came out. "I wanted her to make her choice," Dahi continued. "Help the beggar and face mockery? Or walk away and earn approval from beings who measure worth only in power and wealth?" She glanced back at Yuna with pride in her eyes. She made her choice. Now everyone here knows what kind of leader she will become. Merchant Torval lowered his head. Of everyone present, he perhaps understood best what had just happened. This was not just about embarrassing powerful aliens. This was a masterful political move. The recording of this incident would spread across the galaxy. Everyone would see a human child choose compassion over approval, and they would see the future leader of humanity refuse to abandon the weakest among them. The aliens had been playing games, but Dahi had been playing chess, and she had won completely. Yuna stood up slowly. She helped Arn rise with her. The old Mavari's legs were weak, but she supported him patiently. "Grandmother," she said, "can we take Oren somewhere safe? He needs food and rest." Dahi nodded. "Of course. We will take him to our ship. The medical staff will care for him." She turned to Security Chief Bannock. "Chief, I trust there will be no problems with this?" Bannock shook his head quickly. "No, Admiral. No problems at all. Anything you need." Dahi began to lead Yuna and Oren away from the plaza. But before she left, she paused and looked back at the crowd one final time. "One more thing," she said. "The next time any of you see a human child showing kindness, perhaps ask yourself this question. Not, is this person important? But is this the right thing to do?" She smiled coldly. You might be surprised how often those two questions have the same answer. Then she was gone, walking away with Yuna and Oren, leaving behind a crowd of the most powerful beings in the sector, and every single one of them felt very, very small. The ship that Dahi led them to was not a small private vessel. It was the Eternal Dawn, a diplomatic cruiser that could hold 500 people. Armed guards in crisp uniforms stood at attention as they approached. They saluted Admiral Dahi and bowed their heads respectfully to Yuna. Oren stumbled as he walked. His body was weak from years of hunger and neglect. But Yuna stayed beside him, holding his arm, refusing to let him fall. "Just a little further," she told him gently. "You can rest soon." Medical officers met them at the entrance. They were kind and professional as they took Oren to the ship's hospital. Yuna wanted to go with him, but her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let them care for him," Dahi said. "You have done your part. Now comes the harder work." They walked to a private observation room with large windows that looked out at the stars. Dahi sat down and gestured for Yuna to join her. "Tell me what you learned today," Dahi said. Yuna thought for a long moment. "I learned that powerful beings are often cruel because no one can stop them." "Yes, what else?" "I learned that they respect strength more than goodness. They mock me because they thought I was weak. They stopped when they learned who I was. Dahi nodded. And how did that make you feel? Sad, Yuna admitted. I wish they had stopped because what they were doing was wrong. Not because they were afraid of you. That is a good answer. Dahi leaned back in her chair. But here is the question you must carry with you for the rest of your life. How do you change that? How do you build a galaxy where beings are kind because it is right, not because they fear punishment? Yuna had no answer. She was only 8 years old. But she would think about that question for many years to come. There was a soft knock at the door. A medical officer entered and bowed. Admiral, the patient Oren is stable. He's malnourished and has several treatable conditions. With proper care, he should recover well. The officer paused. He is asking to see the young miss, if that is permitted. Dahi looked at Yuna. Would you like to see him? Yuna nodded eagerly. They walked together to the medical bay. Oren was lying in a clean bed, wearing fresh clothes. Medical machines hummed quietly around him. His clouded eyes looked clearer already. When he saw Yuna, tears began to fall down his face. Little one, he said. His voice was stronger now. You came back. Yuna sat in a chair beside his bed. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Oren reached out and took her small hand in his thin one. Do you know what you did for me today? I gave you some food, Yuna said simply. And some water. Oren shook his head. No, you gave me much more than that. He took a shaky breath. 60 years ago, I was a physician. A good one. I served on a human medical ship during the plague of Kethros. Yuna looked at her grandmother with surprise. Dahi's expression had changed. She was listening very carefully now. The plague was killing my people, Oren continued. Millions were dying. No other species would help us. The risk was too great. The Mavari were too unimportant. But the humans came. A small ship with a small crew. They did not know our names. They did not know our status. They only knew we were dying. His grip on Yuna's hand tightened. I worked beside those humans for 3 months. We saved thousands of lives together. And when it was over, I asked them why they came. Why they risked their lives for strangers. He smiled through his tears. Do you know what they said? Yuna shook her head. They said, because you needed help. That was all. That was enough. The room was very quiet. After the plague, I struggled, Oren admitted. I saw too much death. I made bad choices. I turned to drugs to forget the pain. I lost everything. My career, my family, my dignity. For decades, I wandered from station to station, begging to survive. I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten that I once mattered. He looked at Yuna with clear eyes. Today, a human child sat with me on a cold floor. She shared her food. She called me her friend. She refused money to abandon me. She treated me with the same kindness I saw 60 years ago. His voice broke. You reminded me that the galaxy is not only cruelty, that some beings choose to be good, even when it costs them. You gave me back hope. Yuna did not know what to say. She simply held his hand tighter. Dahi stepped forward. Oren, when you recover, what will you do? The old Mavari was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened his thin shoulders. I was a physician once. Perhaps I can be one again. There are many like me on stations like this. Forgotten ones. Broken ones. Perhaps I can help them the way your granddaughter helped me. Dahi smiled. It was the first warm smile she had shown all day. I think that can be arranged. Weeks later, the recording of the incident at Nexus Prime spread across the galactic networks. But it did not spread as an example of human foolishness. Someone had edited it together with Oren's story. With his history of serving on the human medical ship, with his years of suffering, and with his decision to return to medicine. The title of the recording was simple: "This is what humanity means." It was viewed billions of times. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had dismissed humans as a minor species watched a small girl refuse to abandon a beggar. They watched powerful beings mock her and offer her money to walk away. They watched her say no. And many of them felt something they had not felt in a long time. They felt ashamed, not of the girl, of themselves, of the galaxy they had built, of the cruelty they had accepted as normal. Some of them decided to change. Not many at first, but some did, and that was how it always began. Years later, when Yuna took her place as a leader of humanity, she kept a small photograph in her office. It showed an old Mavari with healing eyes, standing in a clinic, surrounded by patients he had helped. On the back of the photograph were 3 words written in shaky handwriting: "Thank you, friend." Yuna never forgot the lesson she learned on Nexus Prime. Power was not about wealth or weapons, or the number of worlds you controlled. Power was about the choices you made when no one important was watching. It was about how you treated those who could give you nothing in return. That was what humanity meant. That was what she would teach the galaxy. One small kindness at a time.